Sunday morning. Good morning, everybody. What did you think of the Devin Haney Vasily Lomachenko fight? I watched the whole fight live. I did think Lomachenko won. I think it was a close fight, but I think Loma won because he hurt Haney more than Haney hurt him. Now, I actually did call the fact that I thought if it went the distance, Vasily would likely win the decision, but that they would drop him. That's just what we spoke about post sparring Saturday morning at Victory MMA. We all agreed that Haney wasn't going to knock out Loma, but Loma was definitely the more skilled fighter, and that did show up. Now, props to Haney for adding a little wrinkle to his arsenal of throwing the body shot. And we also discussed that at our boxing sparring session, that, Vasily favors that high guard, so it does leave his body open. Obviously, Haney's camp, that's not rocket science, right? They knew that, so they figured, okay, we're going to maybe fake up, go down to the body. The other side of that coin is Vasily knows full well he has that high guard. He knows he's leaving his body open. He's not going to switch up now because he's been doing that high guard since he was a kid, all the way through the amateurs. 2 gold medals as an amateur, 2 Olympic gold medals as an amateur. He's not switching up his style at this point. He's only adding subtleties or wrinkles to what he already does really well. And he does have a very effective high guard. He also knows how to break down somebody else's guard. So, the point being, I'm assuming he knows how to deal with the body shots because he knows full well he's leaving himself open to the body shot by having that high guard. So the question is, how much damage did those body shots do? They don't tickle, but I'm assuming that Vasily knows how to deal with the body shot. Was it a highway robbery? That's a tough one because it was a close fight. However, if you look at damage done, even though Vasily's face shows more markings on it, he did wobble Haney. Haney never really hurt Vasily. And I don't score fights as I watch them because I just like to watch it and enjoy it. But I think it's hard to justify 8 rounds Haney, 4 rounds Lomachenko. That's tough. So the bigger picture is what's going on with boxing. Last week, people were pretty outraged at the Barroso stoppage. I didn't watch that fight because I'm not a Rolly fan, so that would be the only reason to watch that fight, really. Maybe I'll go back and watch highlights of it now to check out that stoppage, but here's what I think is happening overall, is that the boxing industry, the muckety-mucks, the wizards of eyes behind the curtain that control the sport, people that are never on camera, in other words, not the people who have the courage to step through the ropes, all those guys I'm saying guys because I assume they're mostly men, but there's probably a few women involved in the business end as well. I feel like they feel like they're losing maybe control of the sort of combat sport. Maybe they feel a little bit that they're getting outdone by, of course, the UFC. And maybe boxing is starting to lose popularity with the younger generation. I mean, there's always going to be diehard boxing fans like myself and people older than me, some people younger than me that they're always going to watch all the big boxing fights. But I think a lot of the younger generation, they're over boxing. They're more into MMA. It's just perceived as being the cooler sport. So sometimes when that happens, the powers that be feel that they have to control the narrative. How do they do that? They anoint a, quote, winner that they think can carry the sport forward. And this phenomenon is not just about boxing. It's not about Top Rank. It's not about ESPN or this TV station or that TV station. It's a phenomenon that happens in all sports, even at the amateur level, even when no money's involved. I'll give you an example. Judo. Judo is a zero status sport. Most people can't name one judo competitor right now, unless you follow the sport, unless you're involved in the sport. A lot of people don't even know what judo is. But even in judo, where there's no money, you spend your money if you're a judoka. You don't have really the opportunity to make money. You or your parents are going to fund your whole career. There's no status because it's just not a well-known sport. And there's no money. And yet, the people in charge still do the same thing. They try to choose someone they think is going to win for their country. So, for example, if we're talking about national team selection, because judo is an Olympic sport, you can't just show up to the World Championships and pay your money, like with BJJ. For judo, you must qualify through your home country. So you have to be selected to make the national team that is going to go represent the United States or Canada or whatever country at the World Championships, at the Olympic Games, at the Pan American Games, etc., etc. So the selection process can sometimes get a little ugly. Sometimes there's somebody who's like a clear number one and they're almost untouchable because they represent the United States and they're consistently placing at the World Championship level, they're consistently medaling. So it's pretty obvious that they're going to make the U.S. team, if that's the case. But sometimes there's divisions where there's maybe a handful, like 3 or 4 athletes who are in very close contention, and that's tough because on any given day, probably one of them could win. So the fair thing to do is to let those fighters compete against each other, duke it out, and whoever comes on top, they should be the one selected to make the team. But that doesn't always happen. Okay, I can't think of it. I haven't followed judo for so long that I can't give you a recent example, but I'm going to point back to a video that, switching sports here, switching back to boxing, I'm going to point back to a video that Paulie Malignaggi made about his experience in the New York City Golden Gloves back in, I think it was 95. Paulie was in the final of the Golden Gloves at the theater at Madison Square Garden, and he was fighting a man named Darling Jimenez. I'll put the link to the video so you can hear it straight from Paulie's mouth. And I remember actually watching that fight. I made an effort to go to the fight because I wanted to see this matchup. Darling was literally the darling of the New York amateur boxing scene at the time. Everybody thought, this kid is, he's going to do something great in the pros. He's got the good looks. He's got the moves. He was consistently winning local amateur and even national tournaments. So he is what I call the quote-unquote anointed athlete, because in the sort of local boxing media eyes and in the sort of gym scene, he was spoken about as if he's the next big thing, to go from amateur to pro, kind of representing New York, etc. And Paulie was definitely the underdog in this amateur matchup for the finals of the Golden Gloves. The thing is, unfortunately, New York City Golden Gloves no longer exists as a tournament, but historically, it was such an institution. And for a young man, I'm going to say men because women weren't participating historically until 95. Actually, I made a mistake. That fight with Paulie and Darling was past 95. I don't know the year. But in any case, historically, the Golden Glove, New York City Golden Gloves, is a really important tournament. It was almost as prestigious or critical to a young man's career as, say, making the U.S. Olympic team and medaling at the Olympics. Almost. Because the eyes of the world, eyes of the boxing world, were on Madison Square Garden for the finals of the New York City Golden Gloves. So my point being that this is a huge moment for both fighters who make it to the finals. It's a huge moment for Paulie. It's a huge moment for Darling. So what happened? I remember watching that fight firsthand. I had a great seat because I sort of positioned myself to have a great seat. I had bogarted my way in through the back door, but made my way around, so I had a straight-on view of the ring in the amphitheater that is the theater at Madison Square Garden. And I remember watching the fight, and at the end thinking, clearly Paulie won this fight. Like, he won. And then what happens? You know, the scorecards get read, and they give the fight to Darling. And, you know, cat calls from the crowd. And I remember clearly, looking back, as Paulie and his corner were leaving the ring, Peter Safarza just did one of those waves at the, you know, at the ring, at the ref, at the officials, like, you know, like, you guys are, you know, full of it. And in my opinion, you know, I just was like, oh, no, Paulie won that fight. They robbed him. Fast forward to Paulie's video where he's recounting this, and he says that they told him post-fight, oh, the power went out during your fight, the computers got disconnected, so we went back to scoring by hand. Now the point is, back then there was this like computer system where officials, if they saw somebody land a punch, they're supposed to hit a little button, and there's supposed to be 5 judges. I think 3 out of the 5 hit the button at the same time, then a point gets scored for that fighter. You could argue that that's a flawed system, but the point being that that was the system they were supposed to be using as per official amateur boxing rules at that time. And oh, magically, the computers went out when Paulie's fight was going on, so they, quote-unquote, had to go back to paper and pen. And that just screams of, like, they chose who they wanted to win. They wanted Darling to win because he was, quote-unquote, the anointed one. Point being, now, you might know Paulie Malignaggi's name because he did ascend to be a World Championship pro boxer and commentator, and now doing his own thing on his YouTube channel, as well as promoting and being involved with other boxing ventures. What happened to Darling Jimenez? I don't know. I think he had a few pro fights, but he never got to the level that he was supposed to, according to these muckety mucks. So here's my point. I'm saying all that to say this. That's just one example of where the boxing industry, which includes the media, the hangers-on that hang out at the gym, just the talk, trainers, managers, everybody, promoters, sometimes they think, oh, this kid has it. This kid's going to make it to the top. And so they sacrifice somebody else to clear a pathway for this other kid. But that other kid doesn't always, quote-unquote, make it to the top. And in this particular case, obviously, Paulie did. We can look back in the rearview mirror and say, hey, you guys, like, you got it all wrong. But, you know, it also points to the tenacity, temerity, determination of a fighter like a Paulie Malignaggi, who just, you know, that must have been extremely hurtful for him to, quote-unquote, train his butt off, work for years towards Golden Glove finals, and then get robbed. That you know, it's just gotta hurt. But he didn't stop. He just kept going. And then he endured whatever he had to go through as a pro, and he made it to the top. So So maybe they're doing a parallel thing with both Rolly versus this Barroso fellow, who, that's really sad that they didn't. If that was an early stoppage, that's really unfortunate for Barroso. But they're trying to clear a path for Rolly because he's a young guy, he's got a lot of followers, etc. Same thing with Haney. He's the younger guy. They feel that if he beats Lomachenko, that's a very valid notch on his belt. And they can keep pushing Devin Haney, is undefeated young fellow, gonna take over boxing. I guess they feel like Vasili's on his way out. So the point is, I think sports resort to that when they feel that they just need to control things more, and instead of looking to themselves, why is boxing failing in comparison to MMA? Address that issue. Don't try to anoint somebody and think that they're going to carry the sport, because it doesn't always work out. So I'm always going to be on the side of the fighter, that's for sure. I'll gladly admit to my bias, but I think as a school teacher too, you need to self-reflect. What do we do well as a boxing industry? What are we not doing well? And address it or not. But if you're not going to address it, then you got to deal with the consequences. So right now, 2 weeks in a row where you've left boxing fans kind of, I don't know, anywhere from outraged, just really disappointed, to just calling BS on the sport, you're alienating that fan base. It doesn't make us want to keep watching if robberies are going to happen, right? It doesn't give us any more confidence that the sport is going to do well when the guy who won isn't given the victory and isn't allowed to sort of advance his career that the W would allow, right? If Vasily is now undisputed, he can certainly defend that for a lot more money, and presumably in an even bigger fight with a bigger promotion, because it would have been his first defense of all the belts. Conceivably, he could have lined up a lot of different like big fights for all those belts. So the outcome, his manager said they're going to file a protest. I think he should on GP, if only to show hey, we're behind our fighter, we're not going to put up with this, and we're going to file a protest. And they'll probably do so knowing full well that not much is going to happen with that, because unless there's something like a stoppage due to a cut that they say was a headbutt, but it was actually a punch. There's not an incident they can point to and say, you guys got it wrong. But they should file a protest anyways, just to file the protest and say, hey, we're not going to put up with this, Haney pretty much announced that he's going to move up to 140, so I guess all those belts at 135 are then vacated. So Vasily could arguably vie for 135 belt against somebody else. But it's just unfortunate that he might have to do that piecemeal. Excuse me. Meaning, I don't think he would just be able to fight for all the titles all at once versus one other opponent. That would take some doing. It's not impossible, but it would certainly take some doing on the part of the promoters, managers, and those belt bodies, sanctioning bodies, and then, of course, the commission. So we'll see. But boxing fans, don't give up on the sport. Hopefully we will get some good fights down the road before the year's out, and proper decisions. So that's my take on the fight. Let me know what you think. Have a terrific Sunday.